Hey, what's going on? And welcome back to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Your host, Thomas Keenan, coming at you guys today. Spending the day here, actually the week, in beautiful Sandy, Utah. A little bit of a different scenery for those of you who are saying, hey, what's going on? The studio looks different. Yeah, the studio is much different because I'm in like this area of in between my living room and my kitchen. I don't have the normal studio set up with all the fancy stuff and lights and whatnot. But anyway, that doesn't matter. We're mobile, we're traveling, and we're resourceful individuals, and we make things happen. But today I've got Park Howell with me, and this gentleman is very accomplished. I saw his bio and his application for this podcast come over, and I read it, and I was like, oh, guy's done some cool things. Let's have this conversation. So, Mr. Howell, welcome to the show, sir. It is an honor to have you here with us, and I'm just excited to kind of dive in and hear a little bit about your story and see how we can help others succeed in business.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And you're in Sandy, Utah right now. My brother used to live there, and we would road trip up from Phoenix with our kids, like you did with your kids running out there from Texas. And we had some of the greatest skiing adventures up there at Snowbird. And I mean, beautiful part of the country you're in right now.
Yeah, it is. You know, we came in last night. We spent yesterday, we left New Mexico. We drove through New Mexico most of the day, Colorado, and then into Utah. Just as we got into Utah, the sun was setting. So we got to see some of the beauty, but we missed kind of going through Moab and all those beauty spots down there as well. I kind of wanted the kids to see that. But on the way back to Texas, they'll get a real good glimpse of it because we put, road trip with kids. If you don't leave early in the morning, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about you. I know we've got some cool things that have been accomplished. You've got some really big name companies that you've done work for, consulting and coaching and speaking and whatnot. I want to hear about that because I'm very interested in how you got your foot in the door to do so. You've got an online course. You've got a book that you've authored as well. Like there's so many questions I've got spinning in my head over here that I want to ask. I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to actually send it over your way and say, hey, give me some info on you and tell me how this all came about.
Yeah, well, let me run you back about 4 decades almost now, when I was studying at Washington State University, and I was a music composition and theory major because I just love music and writing songs and that kind of thing. But I knew I probably wasn't going to make a living as a composer, so I also got a degree in journalism and public relations and launched into the advertising world. Now, fast forward almost 40 years, and I am teaching the composition, the theory and composition of storytelling in business to help leaders excel through the stories they tell. And it really comes from my work in the ad world. I ran my own ad agency for 20 years in Phoenix, Arizona called Park Co. And we did a lot of work for local, regional, and some national brands, a couple of international brands. And I ran that for 20 years, but I found in the early 2000s that I was kind of losing interest in it because I came through the traditional advertising world of radio, TV, public relations, that kind of thing. And of course, social media was taking over and e-commerce was taking over. And what I like to say is we used to work with our brands to own the influence of mass media. But as you know so well, the masses have become the media. And they own your brand story. So I went in search of an answer of how do you hack through this incredibly noisy world out there and hook the hearts of your customers to get them to lean in and buy your product or service offering. That's when I started studying storytelling and what Hollywood knew about it, and how we could apply that in our world. And we had a lot of success with the frameworks that we developed out of that study. So much so that our clients came to us and started saying, could you teach us how to do that? And I just found that I really enjoyed the coaching and teaching part of it much more than running the ad agency part of it. So in 2016, I completely pivoted away from my agency. And now all I do is consult, teach, coach, and speak really internationally with brands large and small.
That's awesome. There's definitely overlap in our stories. And I'll give you the quick background here because I want this to be about you and not me. I spent 22 years in the automotive industry, specifically auto electronics, and I was a custom car audio installer, then had a business that went down the path of GPS tracking, dash cameras, telematics, and whatnot. And similar to you, 2020 came around and I was like, hey, I'm kind of done, burned out. This is not fulfilling anymore. We're kind of good at it. We make money and all, but at the same point in time, like something was eating me inside. And decided to exit the company and go full bore into coaching and consulting myself, because I don't know how it is for you, but inside of me, internally as a human being, that's where I found fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I love it. I mean, we were running these campaigns for customers and we were having success using these story frameworks. And then it was just so interesting because they would come, and I never had this request of me before. And they said, "This is great. Could you teach our sales team how to use these structures? Can you teach our marketing team? You teach our leadership in HR?"
Mhm.
And then Arizona State University came calling. And they said, "We have seen what you've been doing with storytelling in the brand, and particularly in the sustainability world. Would you teach an executive master's course on it?" And I go, "Well, I've never taught in my life." They said, "That's all right. You're a professor of practice. We'll help you with a curriculum designer, or that curriculum designer will help you
Yeah.
make it land." And so I did that for 5 years as an adjunct professor. And that's really when I realized, man, this is my calling. This is
Yeah.
what I need to be doing in the world. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me how the door kicked open and you started working with some of the big name brands. And if you could mention a couple of the ones that you've worked with, I'd love to know.
Oh, yeah. Well, right when I started my business of story practice, I'd been teaching a lot leading up to about 2016, but
Mhm.
that's when I really went in all in. And one of my very first clients was the US Air Force. And
Okay.
they would bring me out to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. twice a year to work with their brigadier to four-star generals, teaching them these frameworks so that they could recruit and
Mhm.
retain more of their airmen and women, service members. And so that was like my first big brand that I got into.
Hold on a second here. I got to interrupt
Yeah.
because my mind is spinning here and I have to get this question out. Everyone, in my opinion, has or experiences some form of imposter syndrome at some point in their life or career,
Uh-huh.
right? You go into a room and you're working with generals exclusively.
Yeah.
There's got to be some level of, oh my God, how did I get myself here? And why do they think I'm the one who's best to teach them? Did you have any moments where you're like, how is this me in here? This should be somebody else.
Well, I guess kind of yes and no. I mean, I had been at this for so long, and by
Mm,
by being at this, meaning the communications world and teaching people and training, that I felt like it was more of a natural next step for what I was doing. Now, Joseph Campbell, the writer of The Hero's Journey, the creator who's really inspired me, um, said this, and it was that when you follow your story, doors will open where there were only walls before. Actually, he says when you follow your bliss, but what he means by that is your story, what you are really into. And I started seeing that happen. I mean, I found myself in Hearst Tower out, the big publisher out in
mhm,
Manhattan, working with a bunch of companies. That was kind of the first time I'm like, whoa, what the hell's going on here, man? This Joseph Campbell guy was right. But once I started working with the Air Force, not so much. I didn't have
mhm,
that imposter syndrome feeling because I learned something really powerful from a fellow professor over at ASU. And he was in the documentary filmmaking department of ASU. And he says, whenever you feel like you have imposter syndrome or you're super nervous before a presentation, he says,
mm,
the reason why is your ego is taking over and
mm,
you're making it about you. Instead, when you feel that welling up in you, say, I don't care what happens to me on stage. I could pass gas, I could fall off the front of the stage, I could my whole way through it, as long as I am there in service to my audience. He says, make
mm.
that shift. It's not about you. It's all about them. And once I did that, I got around the imposter syndrome. It didn't bother me as much because I knew what I was teaching worked. And I've
Yeah.
got the testimonials and the ROI to show that it worked. So I was more eager to get there
Mhm.
and work with them than not.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I'm a big believer in storytelling and the power of it as well, right? And I'm definitely not dialed in like you are. It's not what I do or what I present for my clients. But there's something about having a product or a service that it has the ability to transition from the business world to the federal government and military world as well, because that's just the power of story.
Yeah.
Power of story, in my opinion, can impact everyone, and it does impact everyone that it comes in contact with. So if someone is coming out and they want to, spread their voice and get a little boisterous and go tell the world they got this great thing to offer, in your opinion, what's the best place for them to start? How do they start crafting this story?
Well, the question is, what is your platform? What is it that you uniquely do, and how you are uniquely equipped to help someone in particular? So, for instance, let's just take the storytelling world. Of course, it's become all the latest rage and buzz, and there's lots of storytelling gurus out there and whatever, and that's fine. That's who I get to compete with. But where I really shine in ask my customers, I mean, what really moves me is not just telling them about storytelling and how great it is, but showing them these 3 proven little frameworks that you can use in everything from your email messaging up to your big grand brand storytelling. So you've got to, I mean, it's such a crowded market out there for anything and everything that we all do, that you really have to find your core offering, that singular problem solution dynamic narrative that you can really own, if that makes sense. And let me give you a quick example of it, if I can. So you talked about books, and yes, my first book I wrote is a textbook called Brand Bewitchery, and this is everything I learned out of Hollywood, taking the hero's journey and boiling it down, mapping it to business in what I call the story cycle system. And this process has literally grown brands by 600%, but it's kind of complicated. I mean, this book will walk you through it and you can do it for yourself, but it's complicated. Over the years, it was about 10 years ago in 2013, I learned this framework called the and, but, therefore. So while my story cycle is 10 steps, the and, but, therefore is just 3 words. And, but, therefore, and it works because these 3 words, when you put them in the form of a sentence, uses what we call the 3 forces of story. And those are agreement, contradiction, and consequence. And our pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, limbic buying brain loves to have information delivered to it using this framework of agreement, contradiction, consequence. So for instance, and I'm going through this for your audience, your listeners, to use the ABT to really dial in what it is you do. That statement of agreement is, here's what your customer wants relative to your offering and why it's important to them. The but statement is a statement of contradiction, but they don't have it because of this big problem. The therefore is the statement of consequence. Therefore, imagine when you get it, when you work with us to do, this for you. So for instance, I'm working with the Home Depot, and one of their guys internally asked me, he goes, Park, what's the shortest and, but, therefore, or the ABT? And I said, oh, that's easy. You communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. That's as basic as you could possibly get. And I did that kind of tongue in cheek, but it was fun. Set up, you communicate and care. That's aspirational, important. But here's the problem: you're boring because you're leading with features and functions and data, when what your audience really wants is the emotional pull of a story. Therefore, own any room by telling stories based on the 3 proven frameworks from the business of story. So I use, that's kind of my and, but, therefore, and I was just kind of vamping on that, but it's led to my moniker that clients call me the world's most industrious storyteller, because I show them how they can use these story frameworks and turn it into real revenue, real ROI that they can base off of their storytelling.
I like it. I just pulled up my phone and wasn't looking at you, and I wasn't being disrespectful. I was writing notes in my phone for stuff so I can go back to it later and dive in a bit deeper.
Well, let's do one for you. We'll do it real quick. Yeah, people always love this stuff. Let me show it to you in action.
I'm ready.
So here's where, do you want to do it about your podcast or your product or service offering?
Yeah, let's do it for my coaching, and I've got a couple different levels. Let's do it for my group coaching.
Okay, group coaching. Here's what I want you to do. Who is your number 1 audience for that
number
group
1
coaching?
audience? Small business owners, those who've just started, who are doing less than $1 million gross sales a year.
Okay, great. What do they want relative to your coaching? They don't know about your coaching yet, but what is it that they want? We want to set the stage
Mhm.
for your coaching. So for a small
Um,
business owner
yep.
who wants,
Systems and processes so they don't have to spend all day, every day doing everything themselves.
so a small business um, uh, uh, owners who want efficient processes, and why is that important to them?
Because they keep burning all their available time working in the business day in and day out.
Okay, but let's make it positive.
Okay.
They want more efficiency,
Hmm.
and if they dialed in these
Mm.
processes, then what is the positive outcome?
They're going to make more money and get time back.
They're going to save time and make more money. All
Hmm.
right. So you are a small business owner running a dynamic company, and if you just had your business processes dialed in, then you will not only save time, but make more money.
Hmm.
That's essentially your value prop, something like
Yep.
that.
Correct.
But now let's insert the problem.
Hmm.
But they're frustrated because of what? Because of what problem?
They have trouble finding quality help.
Okay, but you're frustrated and inefficient because you can't find quality help.
Hmm.
Therefore, imagine freeing your time and money when you do what with you?
Sign up. Yeah.
How is your coaching any different than anybody else? Do you have a proven
Yep. Yeah,
process?
we
Do
do
you
have a
have
proven process. So yeah, it's based around a lot of things. We start with time studies, right? We find out where you're inefficient first, and then we build a game plan around basically ridding you of those inefficiencies.
okay. So that's interesting. So you have these time studies. You first do the discovery to figure out where they're wasting time, and
Mhm.
then you come back with the fix.
Correct.
Right. So let's now move that concept up top again.
Mhm.
And this is kind of the process of creating an ABT. And for all of you watching and listening out here, do this for yourself. So your number one audience is, and you're going to use the pronoun shift of you. You're going to literally talk to you, the customer, you,
Mhm.
the audience, or whatever. So when I'm saying you, I'm talking about your overall customer base. So
Yep.
you're a small business owner running a thriving company, and you want to make every moment as efficient as possible to save you time and make you more money. But you're frustrated because you are bogged down with inefficient systems and you just don't have the right people on hand, or you're bogged down with inefficient times because you don't even know where you are wasting time. Let's really
Mhm.
focus on this time element.
Yep.
Therefore, imagine, reclaiming all of your free time, focusing on what's really important in your business and growing revenue by, 10x, 4x, whatever. When you use the, popular or the specific time discovery,
Mhm.
tracking, and amplifying services through your organization. The
Yep.
brand always comes in at the very end of the therefore
Mhm.
statement. That way, you're always talking about your audience, placing them at the center of your story, and you are sharing it in a way that our, pattern seeking, decision making, problem solving limbic brain loves.
Mhm.
This is what I want, but
Yep.
here's the big problem I can't overcome.
Yeah.
Therefore, here's the way forward to do that.
Mhm.
Set up problem resolution, plays
Yeah.
that survival mechanism.
Yep. I love it. I think we have to go update some copy now too. Thanks. Thanks
Yeah,
for the extra
yeah.
work,
Go
pal.
to your website. Go to your landing pages. Those are the best places to go when you see you're
Yeah.
just kind of running on and on about yourself and your
Mhm.
company versus placing it in the context of a story using the ABT from your audience's perspective.
Yeah.
What's in it for them?
Yep. Yeah, that's real solid. I like it. So how much time did it take for you initially to discover this and figure out what the magic formula was before you started using it with your clients?
Well, I've been doing it for 20 years.
Mhm.
So let me go back to the discovery because that's kind of fun. Our middle child, our son Parker,
Mhm.
was going to film school at Chapman University, the Dodge School of Film and Media Arts, which
Mhm.
is a really phenomenal program over in Orange, California. And he was there 2006, graduated 2010, spent 12 years in Hollywood, and his specialty is virtual reality and mixed reality filmmaking. He has since moved to Austin, Texas, just down the road from you in North Dallas,
Yeah.
with his fiance, and they're loving it out there because they got this intersection of creativity and technology there. Having said all that, when Parker was going to Chapman, I said to him, I said, would you send me your books and your recorded lectures when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them,
Yeah.
because I want to know, what does Hollywood know about storytelling that we in the branding, marketing, advertising world needs to know? So that was beginning of 2006. I kind of got a vicarious film school education through him, through all the stuff he sent me. That's when I saw The Hero's Journey, and I'm going, why don't we use this in business? I came across the 15 Beats to Story by Blake Snyder, and I'm like, this Hollywood does this all the time. Why has no one ever taught this to us in business? So I started using it. It took me about a year and a half, but then I incorporated it into our own branding strategies that we would do for clients. And that's when I first brought in the client that grew by 600%, and that was Clinica Adelante Healthcare here in Arizona. That's when I was like, whoa, I'm on to something here. So, man, I've read everything and watched everything you could imagine. In fact, on my website, businessofstory.com, if your people go to the library section, what I've done is sniffed out all of the books and the videos that were most helpful to me, so that other people that want to learn this craft don't have to go digging through all of that. But there's my preferred reading and watching and listening list right there. It was when Dr. Randy Olson taught me about the and, but, therefore. Now, Dr. Olson is a Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist, gives up tenure, goes to USC Film School in his mid-30s, graduates. He says, I was the oldest dude in the course every single time. He produces 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, but now he's written like 8 books. And that was the second book that I came out with that was co-written with Dr. Olson, called The Narrative Gem for Business. And it was Dr. Olson who taught me about the ABT and how he was using it in science and academia communication. When I read about it in his second book called Connection, which came out in 2013, that's when, from a business brand standpoint, I'm like, oh my God, this little ABT, it's like the holy grail of making complex messages simple.
Yeah.
Is it really that effective? And so I started doing a bunch of digging and found almost every nursery rhyme that has stood the test of time is based on the ABT. Famous speakers such as, or presidents like Lincoln, his whole Gettysburg Address is 2 ABTs. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream has about 10 ABTs throughout that propels the story forward. And that's when I knew I was onto something. But before, you had asked the question early on, when were you really comfortable teaching it? And I think it was probably about 2014, after I incorporated the ABT into all my other trainings, that I'm like, oh, this is the DNA of story. In fact, I told Dr. Olson, that's what the ABT is. And he laughed. He said, hey, wait, I'm the Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist. I should have come up with that idea. And I go, yeah, but I'm the brander. So that's what it's all about. So it took 4 or 5 years of really researching it, trying it, until I was so confident that we could really measure the ROI of this stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's dive into the business aspect of it here. So you help people do this. It's kind of your jam. You're obviously and very clearly good at it, because we just did this live in person in about, I don't know, 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. What's the process for you? Who's your ideal client? Who do you want to work with? Who do you want into connections with, so you can help them propel?
Yeah, my ideal customer is lately it has been people that have got great brand stories already. They've pulled together their brands. They just don't know how to talk about it. And so I will come in from my branding standpoint. Don't have to do the rebranding, thank God, because that's time intensive. But I take their story elements and I show them, or their communication elements, and I show them how to storyfy them. And it starts with that and, but, therefore, for their overarching narrative, brand narrative. And then in fact, I'm working with a tech company out of London right now, and they've got 7 different personas that they want to be talking to. So we write a ABT for each one of those personas so that we know we can get super focused on that one big problem they solve for each. And then I show them how to go and find these customer stories and use my 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, as I call it, to be able to tell those stories. So, yeah, it goes back to helping companies, and they're quite often mid-market companies, anywhere from they're doing 5 million to 50 million. Those seem to be the ones that are showing up saying, I know we can double and triple our sales. We just don't know how to tell our story.
Yeah.
And then a second group are the large customers like Walmart Canada's of the world, the Home Depot that I do a lot of work with. When they have sales and marketing teams that aren't communicating, they aren't sharing the same story, they don't have a common storytelling language, they will bring me in to help them, show them individually how to use this, especially the ABT, in all of their communications, right down to building that storytelling culture and having this common language that they use through the 3 proven frameworks that we teach.
Yeah, that's awesome. Here's a question for you. With all your experience and all the clients and customers you've worked with throughout the years, helping craft the story, implementing the ABT, where do you see, or where do you find that most people screw up the storytelling the most?
By not telling a story, actually. So, I'm a great storyteller. When was the last time you were at a cocktail party and you listened to someone going on and on and on, and you couldn't get away, you couldn't get away from them fast enough? It's because they think they're telling a story, but they get stuck in exposition. And what I mean by that, they never get out of act 1. It's and. And that's boring. And when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? So when I can come in and look at someone trying to tell a story, I'm like, okay, you get one and. What's your quick setup? Set the stage for us. Tell us what your protagonist wants and why that's important to them, but then take us to act 2. What in the hell went down? What's the problem? To try and overcome that. You had told me an interesting story early today, if I can share it with your viewers, where you brought your family and 7 kids out to Sandy, right, to kind of kick off the holidays and whatever. And everybody was really looking forward to that trip. But when you contacted Delta Airlines or American Airlines, it was $3,000 per person to fly round trip from Dallas to Salt Lake City, which is just crazy.
That's coach, by the way, folks. That wasn't first class. We're talking coach.
Therefore, you had some great family bonding time by loading them up into your rig and driving them out through, out there. So that is kind of a quick little setup problem resolution story, but you can see the ABT in that. Want to go to Sandy, Utah and have this marvelous time, but it was freaking $3,000 per person to fly out there. Therefore, we loaded up in the Suburban and enjoyed a terrific 10 hours on the road or whatever that is.
Yeah. 10 hours per day.
Yeah. So
2 days.
It comes down to, people think they're telling a story and they're not when you look down to that actual structure of the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah. Is there any difference in the format or the strategy or the formula itself when someone's speaking from stage?
Nope. Nope. Because we are all Homo sapiens, which means we are storytelling apes. If you've ever read Yuval Harari's amazing book called Sapiens, he talks about the history of the Homo sapien and how we have not just survived, but evolved as the most aggressive, invasive species of all times, simply because we can think, plan, organize, and act in story. We can think, whenever you're selling anybody, you are trying to get them to buy into a fictional story because it hasn't happened yet. You're trying to paint this picture for what tomorrow could be and get them to believe it, that you can actually get them there. So we're the only organisms that we know of that can think, plan, organize, and act in fictional storytelling. And then as the storyteller, as the brand, as the service provider, of course, it's all of our jobs to deliver on the promises that we make in those stories to get them a part of our story and then have them happily share our story with their world. You think about it, you've heard this phrase that people buy from and refer to people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah,
Have you
sure.
heard that before?
Yep.
Well, think about your storytelling. It's the exact same thing. I call it my storytelling flywheel. First, you got to be known. Use the and but therefore to get really super specific on the problem you solve for people. And
Mhm.
what do you stand for that makes you stand out in the world? That makes you known for something. Then you got to become likable. So you tell them stories. You don't batter them with features and functions and bullet lists and that kind of BS because nobody cares. They don't care about your offering. They only care about your outcome. So you share lots of stories to build that connection, to make your business points for you, to demonstrate the impact you're having in the world. That makes you immensely likable, especially when they buy in and then you start delivering on all those promises you've made in your stories. And that builds the trust.
Mhm.
And you've nailed the trust when they start sharing your story with their world for the most powerful form of advertising there is, free word of mouth marketing,
Yeah.
which once that happens, you become better known
Mhm.
and more likable
Yeah.
and more trustworthy, and you get this storytelling flywheel going.
Mhm.
So you've got to be really intentional about your storytelling. If you're intuitive, you tend to wing it a lot more than you ever win at it
Mm.
because you go and. You bore your audiences to death.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, shifting gears here before we wrap up this call, because I know you got a hard stop today.
Yeah.
When it comes to putting the book together to explain this to the readers, right, to your audience, my assumption here is the same formula still applies inside the book to tell the story.
You'll see it throughout. So, I mean, you get Brand Bewitchery.
Mhm.
And by the way, I've got a podcast called Business of Story that I've been doing for 8 years. I actually read each chapter of the book
Mm.
on each episode. Each chapter gets its own episode. So it's like an audiobook delivered via my podcast.
Smart.
And people can go and start listening in episode 420. It's 420. And over the course of the next 12 weeks, I read
Mhm.
each chapter of the book. But they will also hear and or read in the book. I use nothing but anecdotes and stories throughout the entire thing to demonstrate my points. And then
Mm.
at the end of each chapter, there are exercises that they can do, to be able to learn from that particular chapter training, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, Randy and I did a very similar thing with this much smaller. This is
Mhm.
just the and, but, therefore. The other one's my 3 frameworks, but you'll see it's delivered in both an educational way, but we also show it to you in action through
Mm.
various case studies. And we use story to train you on storytelling,
Yeah.
basically.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I love it.
Got to model it.
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things. It's like, hey, if you're out there preaching this is the model to use. You better be using it in your own stuff then too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. I like
In
it.
fact, I just did a half-day training out at
Mhm.
no, it was actually a full-day training now that I think about it, at the University of Dayton
Mhm.
Center for Leadership. And when I was rounding out the end of that training, one of the participants very astutely asked, "How many stories did you tell us today?"
Mm.
And I had to go back and I had to count through it, and I delivered 22 different anecdotal stories
Mm.
to make my points, to demonstrate the education in action, because that's the way we learn.
Mhm.
Storytelling is the most powerful learning tool there is out there. So let's
Yes.
use that to be able to invite people in our world, teach them in your case, coaching them on how to find utter efficiency in their businesses, but use stories to demonstrate your impact in the world.
Mhm. Yep, I agree with you. I have this model that I kind of use, and I've been doing this. I started public speaking in 2019 after my book launched. And I made a promise to myself where if I'm going to go and present and tell a story or just some kind of presentation from a public format, whether it's, in a small room of 10 people or an auditorium or a big conference center filled with hundreds or thousands of people, I'm only going to tell something that has I'm going to tell a story that I've personally lived through,
Hmm.
and I'm going to tie that into the lesson. And I do that for a couple reasons. A, as much as I was kind of laughing before when you said, hey, if I go on stage and I hit with the ums and the ahs and I forget what I'm going to talk about, the reason I do that is because if it's something that I've lived through, I'm never going to forget the story.
Right.
Right. Which makes a big difference. Look, I know you've got a hard stop here. And in respect of your time, I want to wrap this up. First off, thank you so much for coming in here today and sharing this awesome framework with myself and the listeners. I know for a fact that I got some great information from you on this and some stuff that we're going to look into a bit deeper later in the week here as the holidays kind of wrapping up and whatnot. But with that being said, I want to give you a moment. I want you to be able to share where people can find you, learn more about your books, your podcasts, and maybe if they want to come and do some business with you, where can we find you?
Sure. One of the best places is LinkedIn, Park Howell. So it's easy to find me. I think I'm the only one on there. Come and, if you like to connect there and follow my stuff, go there. If you'd like to try the And But Therefore framework for yourself, I've got a quick online course with micro learnings in there. They can find that at businessofstory.com/ABT, stands for And But Therefore /ABT. That's the best place to start. And then, of course, if you want to do a deeper dive on Brand Bewitchery and or learn how you can work with me, number one, go and listen to the show on the podcast and or shoot me a note over at park@businessofstory.com. That's my email. Shoot me a direct line, and I'd love to chat with you and explore how I might be of assistance to you and yours to help you all excel through the stories you tell.
Yeah, love it. Sir, I appreciate you coming in here today and dropping your knowledge with us. And I hope you have a fantastic holiday coming up.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, man. This has been a real honor, and enjoy Sandy up there while you're there.
Will do. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you for tuning in to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure you head over to stepitupentrepreneur.com and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast.